and especially after like experiencing other churches and seeing kind of the same pattern of like, again, you don't hold any value unless you perceptively make us look good or you bring some sort of monetary value. So I remember even thinking like driving past homeless people in in Oklahoma and wondering to myself, why couldn't I invite this person to this church that I'm working at? And I knew the answer because I knew if I brought that question in front of the lead pastor, I knew his answer, which would be he doesn't bring any, they wouldn't bring any value.
Hello, everybody. Mike Donahue here with Brian May, and you are on Groomed.Connect on a cold February weekend, and we have a special guest, and I'm talking special for me because he is my son, Keegan, David Donahue. What's up, Keeks?
Hey, how we doing?
Good. It's good having you all the way there from prison, right? You're in jail right now?
Yeah. Is that the same joke that you've been running for the last 10 years?
This is the thing about having my son on. He knows all my go-tos.
Your go-tos, yeah. You can't pull them here. You got to come up
fresh.
original stuff here.
No, it's good to have Keeks on. Brian, you want to update us anything that's going on in the Christian crazy world?
Oh man. There's a pastor in, I believe it is an AG pastor. Gosh, I can't remember his first name. His last name is Roy. I believe it's in Arkansas.
Saw that.
Who is now under investigation for having over the course of, I believe, 20 years, sexually abused a young woman who was in his church at the age of 16 all the way through her coming on staff and being an employee and that kind of a thing. And this guy's a pretty big name, I guess. I mean, I don't follow who's who in those circles, but apparently he's a pretty big name. It was interesting because the church first came out with a letter, said, this isn't true. She's a crazy person, essentially. They didn't say she's a crazy person, but essentially they discredited the victim. And
they always do.
I think they got some heat, and now they have this guy has resigned his credentials. He stepped down. They're actually talking about doing an investigation. We'll see if it's a real one. But the hits just keep on coming, man. I mean, you can't hardly shake a dead cat. I saw a statistic today that in a church a church of 400 people, I don't know where they came up with the 400, but a church of 400 people, on average, 7 women have been sexually abused by clergy.
On it, like that's a national average,
I can't validate the statistic, but I did see the statistic. Yeah, on average.
Wow.
So that's about 1.25% if you do the math in your head.
Yeah.
It's one out of 100. That's not a good stat. Also, I've been following Sean Ryan. I don't know if you guys know who Sean Ryan is. He does a podcast he's got some pretty crazy people on his podcast, admittedly, but he had a woman named Elizabeth Perkins on there talking about this Camp Kanakuk scandal. And they're threatening to sue him for something he said on one of his podcasts about him. And he said, okay, bring it on. See you at the deposition. So
yeah,
this is just coming out everywhere, Mike. It's coming out across the spectrum. It's amazing. It's just crazy. And then our good friend Elise was on a podcast that went up recently as well. We'll have to put a link to that in this.
Yeah, I can do that.
She told her testimony here, and she's out there telling her story. And I just really laud people who find the motivation. I mean, I understand why people want to be quiet. I don't want to shame anybody into speaking up before they're ready, but it takes a lot of courage for folks to come out and tell their story and talk about what happened to them. And for everybody who's done that, just kudos to you. You're helping folks. You're helping other victims find their voice
Yep.
and freedom from all of this. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's the
Well,
up.
thanks for the update there, Vanna. Um, we definitely we wanted to have Keegan on, and it's kind of exciting for me because um, I'm just going to set it up a little bit. Keegan is my son and my oldest child, and I have one son and 4 daughters, including a stepdaughter. And it's kind of wild because they grew up in a Christian home, basically. I mean, in a pastor's home. So Keegan was essentially is a PK, and just it's kind of weird because it's at the same time that I was sort of de-thawing and coming out of this fog, this I don't want to call it deconstruction. I don't maybe it was. I don't like labeling it,
Probably
but
early stages.
yeah. Um, Keegan watched all that. He watched all that, and so I just wanted to give him a chance to kinda, explain what it was like growing up in a Christian home and some of the rules. Like, we laugh about some of the rules, like, we didn't let him do the Pokemon thing, and Harry Potter was the devil, and, we had a we had a few things that were now I look back and go, "Oh, you idiot," But, so Keegs, kinda introduce yourself and, tell us your story a little bit.
Yeah. Um, well, growing up in a Christian household, pretty much up until getting out of high school, attending church, only a PK up until probably like 12 or 13.
Right.
But the effects of being a PK were still there just because um, the situation I was in, going back to the place where my dad was a former pastor, was basically like being a PK again. Because it's not so much the title, but it's more so the reputation. And if somebody has been effective and is a good leader, and they get recognized by you know those type of people, and then you get that kind of pressure of like, oh, you need to be like them, or you need to exemplify the same values that they do. um which again was kind of weird, expecting almost like kind of a clean slate, going back to a place where I was still recognized, but like there was still, and by that time I think there was some friction between you and like the main pastors there. So, for me it was like a weird kind of thing, because it felt like it was almost like the pressure was there from people who were like staff there, and but like the people who actually went there that I like connected with, those were like the connections that were really hard to like let go when, basically it was like felt like I had to like leave or like not be there anymore. So, and that was like mostly in high school and everything. And then getting out of high school, um, having different jobs, being in the Air Force, kind of just having a different life path, and then ended up going into master's commission. Um, in Minnesota, which again was interesting because by comparison, it was honestly probably the least slave labor esque type program out there. Um, but it's still funny to look back on that and still be like, there was still times we were very much overworked for no pay. And um, you know, it was funny because I never felt like, at least in Minnesota, that was ever at the church. It was always at like offsite stuff, which was always interesting to me because it never felt like you were serving the church. You felt like you were kind of serving this, you know, um, I don't know, this like other mechanism that didn't really like have any visibility in the church. So it was kind of weird.
'Cause you did, like,
But
conferences and stuff, right? You'd work conferences or,
mostly like
trade
Christian
shows.
conferences, but then we would do some like kind of secular type things just to temp and like basically kind of make money for the program. Um, And then the other one, like other places were like Christian conferences, but they still had an agenda because it was more about recruiting and getting, live bodies and paychecks rolling. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, it is what it is, and you understand kind of, especially when you're on a lot of those trips where they're kind of, you know, all of the skits and everything are like promotional kind of things to, get kids in. And, you kind of see the snake oil salesman like pitch, like kind of from behind. I
Yeah.
remember we had this kid that was, I never really got along with him. I actively kind of cheered when he messed up, but he would speak in front of the group, and he spoke, in front of this youth group, and he's trying to like sell people on coming the masters. And he basically was like, I don't know. I don't know why I came. And like, kind of ended it.
You should.
And it was
Read the
kind of
script.
like,
Read the script.
yeah, I was like, yeah. It was like the last time he ever got on stage to do any type of
Yeah.
promotional stuff. So, but I mean, when you get burnt out and over time, I mean, it's natural to just like kind of question why you're even doing any of it. And I definitely had those feelings the last like half of the program. So,
Yeah.
which is definitely why one of the reasons why I decided not to go back. And then I ended up working for a church, which was even worse.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. Actually, I'm the one that set that up for you. Yeah.
Thanks, Dad.
But luckily, it wasn't that long. So,
Yeah. Yeah. We better not mention names on that one, but I'd love
no,
to. But,
yeah.
no, so Keegan, what, as far as, seeing all these things, because I know what happened at that church, that you worked at, that was pretty bogus. How that guy treated you, and you saw kind of you know, the, how the sausage was made kind of, and, he was sort of a
Yeah, that
bully. He was
bothered
a
me
bully.
more than how he treated me, because it was more other people that were like loved me and cared about me that were around me with him, and then it was like very apparent that it was like mistreatment. But for me, it wasn't like I didn't see it. It was more, I was more upset about his treatment of his church rather than me, because I mean, part of it is like I am an underling, like there is a certain amount of respect to be paid to authority, but it does have to be earned. But for me, what bothered me more was his approach to getting people to come to church. And I mean, I think that was the thing that rubbed me the wrong way the most. And I mean, the mistreatment of me is like, I mean, it is what it is, but I mean, beyond that, that was more of an eye opener of how a lot of churches seem to be kind of operated, and even like newer churches who maybe like promote themselves as against the grain or like somewhat progressive, like still have a very like ulterior motive, like kind of underneath,
Right.
which is ultimately, to make money. And I mean, it
To
is what
build
it
their
is.
brand.
And
Yeah.
exactly. And if you're not growing, then you're dying. And I mean, that was the effect I felt the most, was like pulling out chairs to make the room look bigger, you know? I mean, it was like crazy stuff like that to make it look more full, taking out chairs based on like how many people they thought were coming in. Which again is like, it's shrewd if you're a businessman and you're trying to
Right.
like, promote something other than, like a religious like maxim. So I mean,
Yeah, no,
it's
that's an old trick. That's a trick that
yeah.
we learned with Jeannie, and those people that you worked for were close
Yeah.
to her. I think they're still close to her. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a little tricks of the trade you learn to make
Yeah.
the room look fuller than it really is. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that they pulled out
Yeah.
those stops.
What was funny to
Yeah.
me is because they had to live stream it, they really had to adjust where the camera was, to get the full spectrum, you know?
Zoom
They
in,
couldn't
zoom
leave
in.
couldn't leave a body out, You
There you
needed
go.
them all in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Gross.
so well, let's kind of wind it back a little bit. So you grew up in this. I mean, your dad was a pastor. Uh, I mean, I know from when I knew him, he wasn't your typical pastor, but he was a pastor. He was on staff. Um, at what point did you start? Because, well, let me just say this: these things happen progressively, right? Just doesn't the light bulb just doesn't turn on one day, right? You
Yeah.
just begin over time. At
Hmm.
point did you really begin to look around and question and say, "Hey, look, the 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 playbill says we're doing this, but we're not doing this. We're doing something besides that." When did you first start to really critically appraise what was going on around you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there was, because again, it's not a just a light bulb was turned on. I think there's a culmination of events and different things presented that change those value sets and definitely make you open your eyes to how things are working and why things are done certain or why things are done certain ways. Um, and I think the even just like the psychology, and I think it came from a lot of different sources. I think I joined debate in high school, and I think that really helped me with my critical thinking. And I think it just translated to a lot of different things because when you critically think in one area, there's almost like a not an addiction, but there's a feeling like everything else is uncovered unless I apply that to multiple things. And I think once I started applying that to church, that was a big one. But I think the early seed was planted when we moved from Bellevue to Rockford because there was a conversation that I overheard between my parents that really illuminated like the the misalignment and vision and like not even just like where the church was going, but like a serious misalignment in like how Christians are supposed to behave. And I remember that being a very kind of like a shake up core because it felt like there was always just this one path. And it was always something that was presented to me through my dad, because that was the most natural way that I was going to get that
Right.
teaching and that source. And so when it became like the fact that there was two different roads and there was people that really did believe that, I think that's what really kind of like set that seed in motion where I was like, okay, now I'm questioning everything. Now I'm kind of like, instead of accepting what was just being said, I was like very critically analyzing it. And I think part of it came from the fact that, like, my dad's a very good communicator. So the part of it was like, none of these people are very good communicators. So it was easy to pick that apart. But then then you watch the people who are
Uh,
good communicators and actually are really good swindlers. And I remember that actually being very apparent to me, like because especially in Oklahoma, where I worked at that church, there was a whole lot of people around me at different churches and like in my age group that were very like radically influenced by those like charismatic speakers that had a very, again, to me, misaligned view of what Christianity is supposed to be. And so I think, again, like seeing all of that kind of put together and then again being consistently in church pretty much until, a little bit after high school. I think that really does like you just overall, especially seeing different youth groups and seeing different churches and how they run it, and seeing kind of the patterns that tie them all together.
so I have a
I
question. So that conversation that your mom and I had, um, was that because I don't recall that, to be honest, but does that
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not doubting you, I know it probably happened, but
Well, I
what
remember you asking me about it even,
did
and
I? What was it? Give me the
I
context of it. What was it? What was the conversation about?
I think it was, especially regarding the you switching or making your motivational program more permanent, but still supported by the church. And it
Okay.
felt like they did not believe in that. And it was kind of that spark of like, okay,
Okay.
like, and me seeing being on the road with you and seeing how it was like changing people and seeing how almost in a way it was changing people more because it was in an area where people really needed it instead of church where people kind of like some people, majority of people went because it's a social club and it feels good to be kind of part of that group. Um, but I don't know. What was your question? Sorry.
No, but no, okay, so that's what I was trying to get to is because that's what I was going through at the time, is I was trying to we've talked about this on the podcast where basically I was going into schools and seeing the effect of it and seeing that it was making a difference and then coming back and, the church was like, "Oh, whatever," and it didn't unless we could count them to be in their, you know, their roles, their attendance, they didn't really care about it. And I was really puzzled by that. I couldn't understand that. I remember I did because Brian, my philosophy has always been, especially with him, is just talk about it. Like just like
Right.
he was in junior high, but he's so smart and he's so um thoughtful that I was like, I'm just gonna include him in this. And so I think I do remember a couple times having that conversation with you. I think I was talking to Rick Lormer once on the phone because he was the national youth director, and I was trying to get them. There was just a big school shooting that had happened up in Minnesota, and I was like, "We need to do something." And I was on the phone with them, and you were listening, and I
Mhm.
think maybe that was part of it too because I was talking to you about it.
Yeah. I mean, there was multiple conversations of that. And I think that stemmed from the fact that it was like really our church that we were a part of, like not being aligned. Cause again, it wasn't like, you were like just a member there. I mean, you were the youth pastor and you were running their master's commission. So, I mean, you were a really big part of that. And it felt like, again, like you having a misalignment with them was like something major and something, almost
Yeah,
like corrupt and wrong, or at least again, a very serious misalignment.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
so let's talk about that for a second. I mean, you saw what your dad was doing out on the road in schools, the impact he was having on people's life, real impact, important impact.
Hmm.
Uh, I would say that if it's anything like what he was doing, what he's doing now, and I think it was, in a lot of ways, I mean, doing, for lack of a better term, doing God's work, um,
Hmm.
but without having to, drag somebody to church afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so what you use two words. One I liked, swindlers, and the other one was misalignment. I tend to use the word grifters, but I like that one too.
Yeah.
Um, what what was that misalignment? What, if, from your perspective at that time, what did you see the church? Um, what was their values? What were they all about? What was their game all about in your eyes?
I felt at that point it was more like, again, like seeing what he was doing and my dad, um and the rejection of that being something that could be life-giving, or at lea like, I mean, like, I think there was a lot of things, like, there's part of it where, again, there was probably a conversation of, like, can this be used not to help people get out of stressful situations or make better choices or value themselves? Like, how can this benefit us the best? And if
Right,
it can't, then why are we doing it?
right.
And I think that was more maybe not like the conversation that I heard, but I think that's how maybe I interpreted over the years, and especially after like experiencing other churches and seeing kind of the same pattern of like, again, you don't hold any value unless you perceptively make us look good or you bring some sort of monetary value. So I remember even thinking like driving past homeless people in in Oklahoma and wondering myself, why couldn't I invite this person to this church that I'm working at? And I knew the answer because I knew if I brought that question in front of the lead pastor, I knew his answer, which would be he doesn't bring any, they wouldn't bring any value. Like they don't bring any monetary value unless you're doing some sort of homeless drive where you're being filmed by cameras. Then he's not perceptively
Right on.
valuable either. So again, it was like,
Yeah.
and then that's such a like, again, it's like and that's such a person that you have has the most vulnerability to reach and actually make a serious life change. Um, and again, it's what can benefit me, what can benefit this institution, which again doesn't give a flying crap about the people that are actually sitting in the pews. And again, it's the emphasis that's put on people again that bring perceptive value or they bring monetary value.
We were talking, Brian and I were talking last couple weeks ago about the feed the homeless thing that this church, Bellevue Church, did every Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
and it was just such a show. It was such a
right.
show, and I hated it. And I would
I didn't want
every
to
staff
mention that
meeting,
by name, but that was definitely in my brain when
yeah.
I was talking about that. It was like, yeah, let's parade them around, in a buffet.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was like once a year we get to feel good about ourselves by inviting the least of the least in, and then they did. They were all about getting the cameras in there. They would make sure the news were there and
Hmm.
and pat ourselves on the back. And it was just a bunch of crap. And
Yeah,
like why don't we do this every day? Oh
right.
wait, because they don't bring any, like you said, they don't bring any monetary value. That is what was happening to me around that time. Was I was really feeling disconnected from an institution that I really respected and admired at the time. And again, I was living my life in front of you. You got a front row seat to literally, to a lot of it because you were in the car or in the
Yeah.
living room when I was having the
I was just
conversation.
within the vicinity. Sometimes I'd eavesdrop, because I'd be like, oh yeah, what's going
Within
on?
100-yard radius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was one time where I was doing something for the national office, actually. I was putting a video together, and Keegan and I had to drive to this is wild. We had to drive to, Indiana because Rick Lormer was speaking at this national convention, youth convention or something, but it was like 7, 8,000 people there, and Keegan was up we were up in his hotel room with him and his wife. I don't know if his kids were there or not, but Keegan was there with me, and well, why don't you describe it, Keegan? Because it was kinda crazy what happened.
Sorry, what was that again?
With Rick in the hotel room, and then he went up and basically preached our argument. Like, when Rick and I were having that argument about real Christianity and what it was all
Oh
about.
yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that wild?
Yeah,
That
no, it was
yeah.
weird. Yeah. I mean, it's very like it's always strange whenever you hear the like singular focused sermon on like one person and you're like it's like the stuff of movies or like even like books, like it's like doesn't seem real. But I remember in high school there was somebody that I was close to that went to a church locally here, and her friend was part of the leadership program at this church, and she was messed with by the pastor, or not the lead pastor, but I believe it was the youth pastor at the time. And I remember my friend being kind of the poster child for this church. I mean, really had like kind of changed her life by going to this church, and had been making kind of all these miraculous changes. And I remember she basically was kind of involved in confronting this pastor, and he singled out a sermon for her in the next one. And again, it was like, man, it's so crazy how people can become so like tied to almost to like cover up some sort of like sin, because that's what it feels like every time you feel like something's targeted towards towards something that is not really like spirit led, but more emotion led.
You said a couple of things there. One of them was when you were talking about how if you didn't look the look, if you weren't, you know, bringing money or talent in, if you weren't contributing somehow to the image of the institution, then you're at least treated differently than those
Hmm.
who were.
Yeah.
I think we all experienced that. And it's, to me, what I saw, it was different than saying, okay, this person has gifts in this area, so we're going to, let those gifts, come forth to help other people, not to help our image, not so we can say, hey, we got this, that, or the other thing, but to really
Hmm.
help people, right? And I think that's an interesting take, and maybe people don't think about that enough in terms of, okay, I'm in this church, I'm in this organism. What is it really all about? What is it doing? Frankly, when you were talking about that, I thought about, your job, my job, anybody's job. You work for a company, you're expected to do something to benefit that company. That's why you get a paycheck.
Yeah.
Um, that's not the way church is supposed to be. I don't think anyway, with respect to the people who come there to be part of that community. What do you have to say about that?
Well, yeah, and I think it's the corporate structure that is absolutely infesting church structure because in a way that I mean, I think even traditional structures allowed for a consensus, at least instead of this kind of authority of one, or even like a spiritual authority, because it always felt like at least like there was one head honcho of the spiritual, like aspect. And they were kind of, again, like taken as the CEO of the company. And it was like everything kind of flowed down from that. And I mean, I don't know if, I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't studied like the early text of the Bible, but I don't think the early church was like that. There wasn't even a social hierarchy, let alone a structural hierarchy. So it's very strange that we see this like, and I think it 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 lends itself to the fact that, again, that churches need that, you know, they need that income to function in order to look like they're growing, or, pushing, I don't know. There's definitely a mechanism to church that seems to be, again, like geared towards profit. And I think that's always going to be more efficient if you're in a corporate structure. But then the spiritual part of the church dies because you have, as soon as you invite that kind of hierarchy, then you're inviting the kind of plagues that actual corporate structures suffer from, which is like cover ups and rampant, misconduct and abuse. And I mean, there's so much of that has existed even in corporate levels and companies. And it's why you have HR departments that are literally dedicated to handling those kind of situations and literally doing trainings on those. And it's interesting that, again, the church adopts those sort of hierarchies, but doesn't have the safeguards in place in order to protect against, you don't hear of an HR department for church. That'd be a nightmare.
Yeah, it would be a nightmare for the senior pastor. I don't know if it'd be a
Yeah.
nightmare
Yeah,
for the elder.
exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting because what you just described is how somebody on Wall Street would look at a company. I mean, essentially, what you said is that, if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not growing, your valuation is going to go down, right? Your stock is going
Hmm.
to become less.
Yep.
And in many ways, I think the church is adopt. I mean, I've heard it in church. Mike, you probably heard it too. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
Which, that. I mean, I'm not gonna throw that whole comment under a bus, but when that's your focus, right? When your focus is growth, when you have a whole industry around church growth, they call it leadership now, right, Mike? But it's really just about church growth.
Yeah.
And that's the focus inside that organization. That seems to be, that's what I heard you describe it. I'm interested. What was the straw that broke the camel's back with this place? I think you said in Oklahoma. Why didn't you finally say, I don't want to be a part of this world anymore. I want to go do something else with my life.
I think because there was like the feeling that um I was somewhat misappreciated in at least what I was like providing, which felt like, at least because I was in charge of kind of the high schoolers youth group, which was a glorified small group. But I think there was like the expectation of this growth, which I expected, and it wasn't like something completely out of left field. But I think what initially kind of threw me off was the expectation that any kid that you were reaching needs to come with their parents and their families. And um, knowing how the pastor felt about certain, uh, like gender. And I mean, we had people who were, I mean, I had a kid whose brother was transgender, and it was
Mm.
just somebody that I was like, I can't invite you to church knowing that, my pastor kicked out somebody who cross-dressed in his church. So, like, in front of everybody. So it was like, it was not only the expectation of you're not here to reach your age, reach the age group that you are like leading. You are here to feed us bodies.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep that coming, you're gonna do great. And I almost refused to do that because it was a misalignment of what I believed what was important, which was, yes, it's important for, again, if you have a vision for your church being like a family church. But I think the effort to fall on me was misaligned, because it was like, you can't walk into some of those houses because they don't respect you, but they somewhat respect me because of my connection with their kid. And so it felt like the kind of like pushing to make it happen. And I think my refusal to make it happen made them kind of switch how they were going to treat my position and treat how I was going to do things. Because I think up to that point they were lenient with how I was running things, but when they weren't growing, then it was like, oh, now we need to focus somehow, or turn this into not a nurturing position where, and I had 6 or 7 students consistently coming at that point, which again is not a lot, and most youth you know circles. But again, for me, it was about making sure that the kids that I had were okay. And living in a very, very um, Christian environment can create a lot of deep subcultures, or opposing subcultures. Which again, I found very, very rampant in Oklahoma where I was. So, the again, the feeling like my position was now changed to something different, again, just felt like it was a breach of what we even discussed in the beginning. So, um
Well, I mean, I remember the conversation I had with them when I went down there. They said it was Paula and John, and they both said, "Well, we thought we were getting you when we brought him in." And I was like, "Well, first of all, um, you couldn't afford me, and because they were paying you, they weren't even paying you. They give you a place to live and some
yeah, I
change.
mean,
It
100
was
bucks a week,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, slave labor
yeah,
thing again, and
yeah,
but they expected you to be, whatever. But what I really liked what I was really proud of you about is that what you just said, that you were taking care of the kids that you had. And that was the heart of what I tried to do too, and what we've always tried to do is, take care of people,
Yeah.
just love on them and, that kind of
And I
thing.
think that too, to the very fact, made it harder to do my job because honestly, my job should not be necessarily to be the sole person who's in charge of that. I mean, it should be
Right.
a kind of a raising by village type of situation, in my opinion. Because one voice is can be very influential, and if it's the wrong, if it's the wrong thing, then it can be really damaging. But when you have multiple voices, what I should have had is people that were above me that were also involved and were people that those students could go to if they wanted to, not just me. And I did feel like a lot of the times, there were things that they told me that they knew they couldn't tell, the other pastors. And I think that just, again, creates more of that rift of like, man, I can't do my job effectively and even help these kids because again, it feels like I got my hands tied behind my back
Yeah.
with the way they were, wanting me to do things. And
Because Keegan, you come across very authentic, and people trust you, and they just naturally do, and they don't with those guys. I mean, I'm sorry, but those guys are phonies, and they they just want so bad to grow that you just don't trust them. They
Mhm.
may be nice people, whatever, but their agendas are so transparent that street people who need really, real love, see right through that.
Yeah.
Whereas you, like, you just have this genuine love and, care, and people trusted you. And
Right.
then people get jealous, and I ran into the same thing with pastors' kids. Like, they would trust me with information that they would never tell their parents, and some of that's just normal stuff, but some of it
Mhm.
is because their parents, you know, they looked at them as trophies. You have to behave a certain way, and so I want to kind of switch gears for a minute. Um, just being real vulnerable for a minute. You, the same time, you were kind of going through all that, seeing the differences between, you know, the hearts of people. We went through a divorce, and your mom and I divorced, and I'm not going to get into the weeds on any of that part of it, but how it affected you, um, because the big part of it for me, the disappointing part of it for me, and I'm gonna cry, was that you saw me unravel. I mean, I was unraveling. My relationship with your mom was over, and then the church was over. I really had no anchors, and I don't have a good relationship with my mom and my dad, and so I was drinking a lot and going out, and I was with girls, and you saw a lot of that, and that had to have affected you, and it's okay to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was, I mean, that time period is very, it just felt like a roller coaster really because there was, again, a lot of numbness, and then, there was it felt like a period of depression. And I think that there's a lot of different factors, and I don't think they just come from you, and I think they come from, different decisions that I've made, and I've have to heal and you know, come to terms with those decisions and those actions. So, I mean, I appreciate you, being vulnerable about it. And I think the effect of it really was more so, you know, not necessarily like the moral part of it, because I think that, I think that just comes with watching your parents grow older. I mean, I don't think that's exclusive to, you know, I don't think that's exclusive to
Deb's
just
done the
me.
bargain.
Yeah. So, and again, there was some fun moments, you falling asleep in Les Mis was one of my favorites, when you were drinking. So,
Just for context, it was Christmas, I think, and I had some wine or whatever, and the kids wanted me to take them to Les Mis, and it's a
well,
musical, the
my
whole thing.
sisters, my
Yeah,
sisters, I was
okay,
not a part
thank
of
you.
that.
But we were all there, and the music's playing, and it's all music, there's no dialogue. So I was
No.
out. I was out, like, but then I think there was a scene
He
where,
woke up for Anne Hathaway's dream song and he cried and fell back asleep.
you know what I said? I go, "She's gonna get an award for that." And I went
Yeah,
boom, right
yeah,
back
he
to
was
sleep,
clapping a bit and then,
yeah.
went right back.
Well, it's funny, but not. It's kinda weird, but I guess I just wanted to, clear the air because 'cause you're saying nice things about me, but I wasn't perfect. I wasn't perfect as a I love you kids, but I came out of crap and, you try to figure out how to raise kids, and probably the biggest thing, the guilt thing I have is not you're not so much raising you Christian because I think that, we tried, even with your mom too, tried our best to be genuine, like
Yeah.
to show you how to care about people and stuff. And I think you guys did get to see that. My regret is just letting you see me unravel. I mean, it was shitty. But I also vowed that I would let you have a front row seat to me, making a comeback, and not
Yeah.
making a comeback, but, like, just doing it right, just getting more stable, and, because I came out of that, as I realized that the church really never was the anchor that I thought it was a lot of it was a show, a lot of it really was. It was a big corporate bullshit,
Mhm.
um but now that I've come to a peace with all of that, and then
Mhm.
I'm remarried and, Rachel's in my life and we're not perfect, but she's a great, we got a good relationship and, your mom's landed on her feet. She's doing well. And so, um, it's like, anyways, I guess I just wanted to put that out there, just give you a chance to comment and you don't have to protect me. I mean, I'm good. So, I know that there's a lot of PKs, a lot of people that raised in the church, kids, even Brian's own kids, that got to see some of the underbelly of
Right.
of the church, and maybe you could just speak to that, Keegan, and just like if you were talking to some kids who grew up in the 2000s, the late 90s, early 2000s, um and saw what you saw and saw how the church was and um just, what would you say?
Well, I think I still have, I think I pride myself on some of the friends that I have gained even through church, who have seen the same things and are even current pastors' kids or former pastors' kids. So, I think there really is and I think that connection still is what helps that kind of critical thinking because it's hard when you because especially people I went to master's commission with or even people that I knew very very well in youth group it's really hard to see that kind of heart change and to see the perpetrators even of it and see how warped it can get. I think that was the heartbreaking thing, but I think it also again it shows you who the real people are because the best friends I've made are people who they're not church haters or people that think the church shouldn't exist, but there's a lot of people who, or a lot of their thinking comes from the fact that it's morphed into something that, is completely different than what the idea is. And again, I don't think the idea is achievable. I think it's something that, because again, perfection isn't achievable. It's not something that we can ever get, but it's the pursuit of that. It's the, and again, it's not for performance or for brownie points, but it's the pursuit of perfection that is where I think we find, where God is. So, um, not, it's hard for me even now, like to fully like believe in an institution that has pure motives. It's seems like everything is a pitch towards something or another. Even like politically based, it feels like there's like different sides and they're trying to pitch you on um, you know, which side represents Christianity more. And it's hard to like, I mean, again, hard for a person who's 30 years old who's, seen some things, let alone somebody who's like 20, just out of high school trying to figure out, this landscape that we're currently in of church, and not even just like now the exposure of all this really corrupt and evil stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Um, but I think it's just people who are now seeing the reactions of people who have whistleblown or who have said anything in the past, and how they get characterized. And I think it's opening a lot of people's eyes. I mean, I've seen a lot of um, Instagram, profiles and people who are former pastors and stuff that have really broken away and really deconstruct like the hierarchy, because I think that's really where it stems. Because I mean, if you think of any, again, corporate or even like government structure, like it's depending on the top flowing to the bottom. And if there's any problems at any level, you just cut off information, and again, it feels like that. And the more exposure of all these really corrupt things going on, I mean, it's hard to like try to make a decision of how you're going to, if you are a Christian, proceed.
Yeah.
Yeah, last week with Steve Hayes, we talked a lot about the institution, and what I'm what I'm hearing, you saying is that somewhere along the way, you figured out how to divide between, as you lived in this, you looked to divide between what was just this institution that had a certain agenda, and what you really felt like was a healthy faith or spiritual community, and that just because the institution didn't line up, that the idea of what you were looking for wasn't necessarily invalid. You weren't finding it. You weren't finding it in the institution, but there's still something real out there that people want and that people desire.
And I think they want it without the feeling of conformity, because I felt like that was the ultimate factor of me determining like I don't want to be like that. Like, and seeing people who were like, again, it's like I think we like, especially Christians, we take a look and we're like, okay, this person is like less of who they were before they became a Christian, and now they are, full of God. When in reality, it's like their personality has been stripped in a certain way, and I mean, it felt almost like a lobotomy sometimes. Like it was like, good Lord, like like people that had so much like charm and charisma, and it's just like, and now it's like the same charm and charisma, but it's like been reprogrammed for like the hive, and it's like, I remember you were like really awesome
You a funny
now,
one.
and you still are, but you're working for them now, like we could see the antenna, it's sticking out.
Yeah, yeah. What is it?
And I joke about it, but it's actually sad to me because I think there's so much like good and so much passion and so much like good-natured, like even servanthood that gets just stomped and completely, I mean, destroyed for the sake of what? I mean,
Well, the institution, I guess, is
Conformity. You
yeah,
said it. Conformity.
right
It's
for the
yeah.
sake of the institution.
yeah.
You're
Mhm.
thinking about my son. One of my sons has me watching Fallout. Um,
I just
and
watched. Yeah, I'm caught up. It's great.
I'm thinking about the folks with the transceiver on the back of their neck, right? You come into
Yeah,
church, you get your install, and away you go, right?
and I think the way it was always pitched was
Oh,
always like look how happy these people are, and I was
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't know, again, it was like,
But
hey,
they clap on the one and the three, though. How could they be happy
yeah.
clapping on the one and the three?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I had a good friend who is in master's commission who ended up leaving the program, and then he committed suicide, unfortunately. And I remember the people in master's commission that I was like super close with, that I knew were super close with him. And again, I was separated from them at the time of his death. We came together for the funeral, and I remember it was such a different, like, it was just such a different reaction, because it was like, and people grieve in different ways, but it felt like it was like, no, I'm not like, I'm supposed to grieve, but I'm supposed to grieve this way, and like I'm supposed to do it exactly like this, and like there was no room for anything else. And I remember that being very alarming, with people who
Keegan,
are very like
I remember you
authentic.
coming back from the funeral. Do you remember this? You
Yeah,
came to the house in Bellevue when I was living in Bellevue, and you lost it. I remember you
yeah,
actually sat down on the kitchen floor. You didn't even sit on the on a chair, and
hmm,
you just sat on the floor and you just bawled. And I sat down next to you, and you were talking about the funeral and how you felt like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I heard you say is that, the it's almost like the people that would from Bellevue that were performing the funeral or speaking at the funeral were reading from a script, almost like almost making an
yeah,
excuse, like we did this right, don't blame us, kind of
yeah.
thing. And I remember you were just wrecked. You were wrecked.
Yeah. I think there was like the feeling of, because it was a open mic type situation where they had like a initial eulogy, and then they let people just come up to the mic. Um and I think what angered me was like there was just so many people that were, and including myself, that were, I felt were like closer to him, that knew him better than, this guy that, and to be fair, since then, or from what I know, this person now is actually has made a lot of good changes. So no disparaging on this person, because people make their decisions, and I really do think it's again, it's a directive thing. It's like, you know
Yeah,
it's
he
sent
was reading the
from,
script. I know
yeah.
who you're talking about. He was definitely in line. He was lined up with
Yeah,
the big guys. He wasn't exactly a big guy, but he was in the middle management, and he knew
exactly.
his role. He knew what
Hmm.
he needed to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if you
So
do go up there and, it is what it is. I mean, people do that all the time, but like, it felt again like it was like this was not caused by us. This, when he was here, he was very much connected to God. Like, this, and it wasn't like he wasn't, but like I also knew him, and I'm like, he wasn't, like, and he wasn't connected to
to their
the
brand.
hive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to
he
right,
wasn't
right.
connected to the hive, like absolutely not. And that's what was like, and it was like, God, this guy doesn't go here anymore.
You don't need to
Why
say that
is there the need to even like talk about the program being like a part of, it just felt very like disingenuous. And um I
because it
mean, there was a
was.
lot of reasons why I was crying. I mean, obviously, like, you know,
Yeah.
just being there with his family and seeing everything. But again, it was just the culmination of all of it, and seeing people's reactions and how they were, again, it just felt almost lobotomized. Like, and I've talked to those people since, you know, and them coming out of masters and everything. And I remember them thinking, like, I remember them telling me, like, it felt like if I grieved in a different way, or if I like had doubts or questions about, like, you know, like why did we let him like fall through the cracks? Why weren't we valuing him? Like if I went any direction like that, it was quickly stomped out.
Oh yeah.
And I remember, and I knew, and because I know that person was a very like authentic person, and that's why it was so surprising to see them completely almost like, in that mode, and then seeing them outside of it is like, yeah, like
They had to. They had
smelling
no
salts,
choice. Right.
like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're up,
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack here. Keegan, we're about an hour into this. So this has flown by, Brian, hasn't it?
Yes, it is. It is
Crazy.
indeed.
I can
Brian, why don't
rant.
you wrap us up? You got a question or you want to comment or um, kind of wrap
I
us up?
wasn't there. I don't know the intimate circumstances of the story that you guys just told. I have been to funerals at this particular church, and I have felt like that it was partly a celebration of a person's life, but it was also partly we're going to lever this opportunity to make people understand their need to be connected to us, that, they'd be better off if that's, which is marketing. I mean, let's just put it bluntly. Um, yeah, 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 right, right. So, um, yeah, I guess, um, just one question as we kind of wind it down here. Um, what would you say to people who, you've already kind of answered this, but what would you just generally say to people of your generation um, with respect to I don't really quite know how to say this. How would you tell them that it's okay that they don't have to care about going to church, and they can still be an okay person? How would you put that?
uh I would say just um I think ignore a lot of like the political stuff as much as possible, because I think especially like from churches, like because I think it's very aligned with kind of the salesman tactic, and I would just like encourage people to like really like look at their own personal values of something or things that they've learned like in church and outside of church, and really apply those like critical thinking skills to what the church is supposed to represent and what it's actually representing. And I think that a lot of people are waking up to that, which I think is a good thing. But I think it's the passiveness of like, this isn't like this isn't my fight. I don't have like if I don't go to church, then that's basically me, protesting. And I don't think that's enough. I think we need to really like push our leaders to be more transparent and to look at restructuring what is allowing for all this corruption and sin in the first place. And I don't think that can be done until, there's real change from our generation, because that's we're the future, and we get to dictate what it looks like, and we get to dictate what church looks like. And I think if enough people are wake up to it and are still involved with what Jesus taught, I think that can really, really make some profound changes. So
That's good. Awesome.
With
Well, Kigo, love you, man. And I have one more thing to do or say, and that is
woo!
tomorrow,
Pat,
baby. I know all
You got a
three of
final
us.
prediction?
I think I thought about it today. It's going to be 28-10 Pats. They're going to blow them out. They're going to beat them pretty harsh. So, and that's today because we're airing this on Super Bowl Sunday. So that
today.
is happening
Oh
today
yeah.
as you're watching this.
All right, I'm gonna go 2014 Pats.
Ooh, close. What's your prediction, Brian?
I'm going to say 27-20 Pats.
Wow.
Oof,
Okay.
that's good.
You guys
All
are
right.
cutting it close. You're probably right, though. All right. Well, hey,
Yeah.
thanks everybody for tuning in. My son got to be here with me today. I'm so thrilled.
Yeah.
Kigo Bigo, and he's a great kid. Love him. And we'll have you on again, Keegan. That was really good. You did a good job.
Yeah.
All right, see you guys. We'll see you next week.